Hi guys, tonight we drift north, far north into the biting air of a sea that once broke lesser men. Sky is bleached as bone and your breath freezes before you can finish exhaling. You're standing at the end of a wooden dock somewhere in 9th century Scandinavia, looking at a ship which seems impossibly narrow for what it has to. Hey guys, tonight we sail north, deep north into the cutting cold of an ocean that once shattered lesser men. The Endure. The water on the other side is half ice, half mirror, and wholeheartedly indifferent to your presence. The air has scents of pine, tar, and salt. A raven caws overhead as if to inquire as to whether you're absolutely certain about this. You most likely won't live through this, not exactly, but that's the glory of falling into history. You get to attempt it. So sit back before you do, like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is for you currently. Now turn down the lights and step aboard the long ship. The planks creak beneath your feet, sticky with pitch that shines like black ice. Men in woolen and furred cloaks, bearded and burly, go quietly about their business, winding ropes, verifying the ornamented oars that will pull on icy waves in a little while. A man laughs a rich, easy laugh, but it's quickly cut off by the sound of the wind moaning. You sense it immediately, the cold that is not weather but personality. It invades seams, nips at eyelids, explores the holes between thoughts, but the crew barely register. To them, this sea is not hostile but backdrop. Red and raw their faces are, their eyes slits against the sun glare. They've been here many times before and they will be here again. You, on the other hand, pull your cloak tighter, wondering what kind of madness drove anyone to choose this life. The sail unfurls a great woolen rectangle stained with the memory of salt. It snaps once, twice, then catches the wind. The ship shudders, slides free of the ice crusting the shore and begins to move. Beneath your feet, the hull hums with energy. Vikings name their ships the Serpent of the Sea, and it's no mystery why. It's alive, sinuous, conscious. The dragon head carved into the prow glares out at the horizon as if challenging the gods to get in the way. The initial spurt of frozen spray stings your face. You lick your lips and get salt, wood smoke, and the faint iron taste of blood. Someone's split lip might be yours. The sailors joke at your wince. They've conditioned their bodies to take what nature provides. Wool on skin, fat in the stomach, faith in the mind. You are surrounded by people who scoured heat out of cold itself. It's so much easier to idealize them, the great explorers, the dashing raiders, but here, with the cold dropping and the sea spitting through cracks in the planks, heroism is more like pig-headedness. Every man and woman on board has learned a survival dance, how to keep toes from turning black, how to sleep sitting up and not freeze, how to eat enough to stay alert. They have learned which wood burns slow, which animal hides shed water best, and which gods to curry when waves start growing teeth. One of the mainstream historical facts, archaeologists have discovered that these longships were constructed with overlapping oak planks, known as clinker-built hulls, which bent with the sea rather than resisting it. That flexibility made them incredibly tough enough to reach across the North Atlantic centuries before Columbus ever considered sailing west. You bend over the side. The water beneath is a churning black glass, studded with drifts of ice. It appears soft, nearly silky, until you picture what it would be like against your skin. There's a reason the sagas describe men turned blue before morning. But the Vikings did well here. They came to read not only the weather but the moods of their world, the pre-squall stillness, the sound a gull's cry changes when snow is coming. Historians continue to debate whether they learned these instincts from their generations of seafaring farmers or if they came about through sheer need. A whimsical morsel. Some of the sagas tell of sailors who carried small, magical stones, sunstones capable of locating the position of the sun even through cloud or fog. Scientists now believe that they might have employed Iceland's spar. A crystal polarizes light and actually serves to find the concealed sunday. You picture a bearded mariner peering over his transparent token, discovering direction amid what appears chaos. When the boat glides deeper into open water, the wind intensifies. It howls between the oars, stirs the fur ruffs, and pulls on your cowl like a wayward child. The beat of rowing starts, slow, measured, entrancing, wood creaks, muscles strain. The men hum to provide a beat, low chants that harmonize with the slap of waves, until the sea itself seems to be singing. You look back at shore, only a thin white line on the horizon now. There's no going back, not until landfall somewhere uncharted. You envision nights under changing stars, ice hardening the ropes, breath condensing ghostly shapes above sleeping forms. You envision what it is like to awaken to snow rhyming your beard, to notice your shipmates grinning through it as if frost were no more bothersome than morning dew. The Viking concept of grit wasn't bravado but routine. Cold to them was just a state of existence, like hunger or wind. A child growing up in a seashore village learned early, never get wool wet, always share body heat with your party, keep your axe dry and your religion drier. This was social wisdom transferred mouth to ear, generation after generation, until it became reflex. And yet, tough as they were not immune to awe. Occasionally, when the aurora shimmered overhead like green fire snakes, they stopped mid-journey just to look. You can almost hear the susurration, the gods are dancing tonight. You get the same shiver not from chill now, but from the smallness of being human in the face of something so enormous. The darkness descends, somewhere in front of you the horizon remains invisible, it is something you feel only. The sailors tie the sail down, fold the oars away and cluster together, the air thick with their soft whispers. A man plays a lyre, the strings shuddering like the light of the stars, the melody dies away in the wind, and the beat of the sea predominates again. You stand, cloak wrapped tightly around you, eyes streaming with cold and wonder how did they manage it? How did they endure this seemingly endless frozen wasteland without even a heater or insulated boot? The answer, as you shall find out, is in their craft, their tradition, and their odd combination of religion and pragmatism. For now, you just listen to the wood creak, the sea hiss, and the heartbeat of a civilization founded on resilience. The longship moves forward, cutting through ice and into legend. You inhale the salt, exhale the heat of your own breath, and know the journey has just begun. The next morning, after that shivering night, you wake under a pewter-colored sky. The ocean laps slowly and heavily, each wave sparkling with a coating of ice. Your cloak is frozen stiff and crackles when you move like brittle glass. You clasp your hands together, recalling what warmth had been. The Vikings around you are unmoved by it all. They stretch and yawn and laugh like it was their favorite season in this gray world. They shared a secret, and it was not magic but fabric layer by layer of human genius spun from wool, fur, and hide. You see a sailor rewrap his legs with wraps of heavy wool known as whiningers. Another stows his beard in a sealskin hood. They were not for looks, but to live, and each layer has a story of craft, trade, and experience behind it. Wool was their miracle. Not any wool, but from hardy northern sheep whose coats became thick and oily. The outer surface kept rain off, and the inner fibers held in air for insulation. Even wet, good wool remained warm. You run a hand down a sleeve and encounter the weight of it rough, thick, alive with the subtle scent of lanolin. That natural oil kept the wool watertight, the sailors warm. Underneath the wool, most had linen shirts against the skin, soft, airy. Over it came tunics, cloaks, and sometimes fur. A wealthy man wore fox or sable, others sheepskin inside out. You observe how the seams are tidily stitched in sinew or wool thread, the edges wound close to seal out the wind. No zippers, no buttons, no logos, just function. One mainstream historical tidbit. Remnants of Viking fabric from grave sites at Berk and Hedderby show surprisingly intricate patterns woven into them. Some items employed diamond twills, a method that created both durability and flexibility. These were not rough furs draped across shoulders, but skillfully made garments by skilled fingers, frequently dyed using natural tints that still barely manifest after 1,000 years. A strange little fact floats into your head. Vikings occasionally rubbed cloaks with fish oil to waterproof them. It was effective, although it made the clothes smell like a dockside stew. You envision the smell brine, smoke, and something distinctly animal blending with the sea salt. No surprise that the sagas speak of heroes whose very presence found you before they even spoke. You sit next to a woman repairing a rent in her cloak. She is serene, needle glinting, fingers red from cold. She hums a tune you don't know but one that feels ancient. When you ask her how she stands the cold, she shrugs. The cold makes you stay awake, she remarks, and if you sleep for too long, it will lock you in forever. The crew laughs softly at her dark humor. Historians argue to this day whether Vikings wore multiple winter and summer wardrobes, or whether they merely layered up during the colder season. The evidence indicates both. Archaeological digs reveal thicker clothes and heavier cloaks buried with northern colonists, while coastal merchants prefer lighter clothes. You see how much the climate influenced them, making do with what little they had. A person hands you a bunch of dried moss. They used it as an insulation, filling boots or under tunics to conserve heat. They even used it as a coarse sponge or bandage in a pinch. You rub it between your fingers and experience how springy it is, how quickly it wicks up moisture. The smallest objects were transformed into tools of survival. You sniff the smell of tallow-rendered animal fat, used to seal boots and condition leather. A man dips a strip of hide into a pot of it and then wraps it around his wrist like armor. His scarred, cracked fingers move with practiced delicacy. Nothing is wasted. Bones turn into needles, intestines turn into cord, fat into bomb. Every bit of nature is warped for warmth. The ship creaks as it encounters a sudden blast. Spray shoots high, flashing like broken glass, then drops across the deck. It drips into your face, but the crew barely flinch. Their cloaks shed water like a duck's back. You can observe how the layers overlap to either push water away, never towards, and then drink in what it needs but never lose its warmth. You see how communal this understanding is. Someone has sewn them to stitch this way, to bind knots that seal from wind, to cover hands in cloth just loose enough to insulate. These are grandmother to mother to son lessons learned in memory long before books or diagrams. A seam is heritage, a fold of cloth, a signature. Even their headgear has meaning. Under fur caps and hoods, many wore plain woolen bands to cover ears and forehead. The Vikings knew that heat escapes the body quickest from the head. When it cooled even more, they wrapped cloaks around their heads, breathing through them. You mimic the action and discover that the wool snatches at the water of your breath, heating it a little before it comes in contact with your skin once more. It is primitive and ingenious in the same instant. Someone makes a joke that the gods keep nothing on at all, and so they made humanity to remind them what cold is. The men laugh, the sound of their laughter taken by the wind. You realize that laughter is also insulation. Hours on, when the sun dips behind clouds of molten iron, the cold cuts deeper. You see that the men shift and shift, transferring weight, swinging arms, stamping feet. Steadiness invites frostbite. Movement generates heat. It is the unstated law of the sea. Keep working. Keep living. You are advised by a fisherman that sealskin gloves are the best for holding oars, since the natural oil makes them flexible even when wet. Another insists upon boots stuffed with dried grass, a trick that allows the water to pass through rather than collecting. You understand that each layer, each item, has centuries of experimentation and error. They have learned about warmth, not by combating the cold but by knowing it. You close your eyes for a moment and tune into the sound of the ship, the slap of the waves, the groan of rope. The wool against your skin is prickly but soothing, like the voice of an old friend. The acrid smell of fur and smoke envelopes you, thick and familiar. For the first time, the cold recedes, almost reverent. You are discovering what the Vikings had discovered. Warmth is more than heat. It is movement, skill, memory, and mutual survival. It is the realization that although the sea might bite, you are able to bite back in your own small way. The horizon grows dark once more. The men pull their hoods close and prepare the oars. You sense the weight of the cloak on your shoulders and realize it is not merely clothing. It is armor, spun from the tolerance of a people who will not freeze. The sea is hard in its gentleness. The following day, when the wind is gone and the boat floats over water as slick as it has been polished, you nearly forget how cold it is. You put your hand out on the railing and the wood nips back with a cold that filters straight through your palm. Every surface here freezes the cold into memory. But somehow the Vikings had means to generate warmth where there should be none. You see a sailor leading you into the center of the ship, where a small blackened pit lies between ranks of shields. It is not magnificent, simply a hollow lined with flat stones, each dark with soot. To its side is a pot, some clumps of charcoal, and a layer of animal fat that shines like amber. This, you understand, is their fireplace, the center of warmth on a ship designed for ice. When the weather permitted, they fired small fires here, not hot ones, but contained embers ringed by rocks that soaked up heat. The stones remained warm for hours, emitting soft heat into chilled fingers and stiff faces. The sailors refer to it as sea fire. Smoke drifted up through holes in the planks or out through open deck, and when the air became too dense, they quenched it and used stored heat only. One mainstream historical tidbit is that Viking ships occasionally included portable braziers, shallow iron boxes charged with coals. Archaeological discoveries in Denmark and Norway attest their utilization. They gave only so much heat as to cook or thaw limbs without endangering the ship itself. Wood and fire were an uncertain friend, but one needed them. A random bit of trivia follows as you see. Some of the sagas speak of sailors heating stones in shore fires before sailing, wrapping them in hides and taking them aboard. These rocks emit their heat over a long period of time during the first night of freezing. It would appear a minor solace, but in a sea like this, minor solaces can equal staying alive. Some still debate whether crews ever slept close to these hearths or shunned them in fear of sparks. The sagas provide conflicting suggestions. Some tell of warmth shared over embers, others mention smoldering ash attended to with care through the darkness. You imagine it both ways, the pale orange light casting over faces half concealed in steam and smoke. Someone offers you a strip of dried fish cooked in animal fat. It's salty, rich, and slightly smoky. The fat coats the tongue and burns warmly down the throat. You understand that warmth can reside within food as well. The sailors brought barrels of tallow and seal fat, not merely for sustenance but to be used as fuel. In a shallow lamp, a twisted linen wick would float on the surface, casting dim light and a trace of heat. You hunch near the pit and sense the warmth rising in vague pulses. It is not sufficient to drive the cold off, but it mellows it, like a candle mellowing darkness. At your side, men mend ropes and women mend sails. The air is scented with pitch, smoke and salt, an incense of determination. One man immerses his hand in the fatty skin and smears a thin coating over his face. It shines in the faint light, protects you from the cutting wind, he says. You imitate him and the feeling takes your breath away. The fat acts as a seal, greasy but efficient, closing off your skin to the air. The Vikings did it frequently, applying it to hands, cheeks, and even nostrils to stave off frostbite. You can sense your paws relaxing in relief. There is poetry to their survival. Fire heats the stones, stones heat the people work to maintain the fire. Therein is a sort of belief, not in gods this time but in materials. Heat is valuable currency, exchanged cautiously between man, rock, and air. Look around you and see how the crew position themselves. The youngest huddle closest to the hearth, while veterans prop against the outside planks, confident in their heaps of wool and years. They speak softly, retelling stories to while away the time. He tells of a tempest so strong it shredded the sail into ribbons and stiffened their beards into ice. We laughed, he says. If you laugh not, you breathe not. The others nod. You try to picture it when storms broke and fire was out of the question. Back then the hearth fell still and heat came from the bodies piled together. They snuggled tight, bodies swaddled in cloaks, shoulder to shoulder. Even strangers were companions when the wind screamed like an animal. The boat sways gently now, the waves lapping softly and steadily. You shut your eyes and try to commit it to memory. The sound of embers crackling, the mast creaking, the breath whispering. For an instant it is safe, nearly home. You understand that warmth here is not only physical but also emotional, shared. No person will survive the icy sea alone. A sailor, Bjorn, starts humming. The melody is low and cyclical, in tune with the movement of the waves. Others follow soon, their voices carrying like the sea itself. The chant echoes in the chill air, resonating through the hull. It's a sense of another kind of heat, and it's from inside. Historians underestimate too much the psychological warmth that counts. The Vikings knew that fear leaves you cold. Laughter, song and motion, these were their true defenses. You hum softly along, feeling the thrum of it in your chest, and the cold that had crept in there starts to fade. Toward the end of the day, they bank the fire against a flat stone to keep the last of the heat. The light fades to a red eye in the middle of the deck. Shadows grow long and the crew huddle into their cloaks. The scent of smoke hangs everywhere, even on the sky. You lean back against a hot rock, your hands unthawing gradually. You notice how primitive this is and how clever. No heaters, no electricity, but knowledge and waiting. The Vikings had made their ship a living thing, one that exhaled smoke, ate fat, and donated its heat through every board and body on the vessel. When the stars come out, they glimmer as if stuck. The sea reflects them exactly, and you have no way of knowing where sky meets water. Your reflection stares back at you, each one ghostly and white, wrapped in fire and fur. The night grows darker, the final glow of the hearth dies to ash. You draw your cloak around you, aware that each day will be colder, windier, harder to endure. But for now you are filled with a strange sense of peace. The Vikings didn't merely battle the cold, they learned to live with it, to tap it for a sort of subtle strength. You shut your eyes, listening to the sea breathe beneath you, and conjure the heat still seeping in the stones. The ship floats on, its small bubble of warmth carried across an infinite expanse of ice. The day starts with a fierce wind and a stench of sweat and salt. You are discovering that there is more to living on this ship than just enduring the cold, but enduring one another. The ocean does not leave much space for modesty or comfort. When the wind freezes water in your locks and salt covers your clothes, you realize that hygiene is a luxury, not a habit. The Vikings understood this reality well. They did not possess soap in the way you do, nor any privacy in which to wash. They used the sea itself instead. You observe as one of the sailors dips a cloth into frigid water and wipes his face without wincing. His face reddens, his face impassive, as though the cold shocks him awake. The salt water was their mirror, medicine, and cleanser. Archaeological finds confirm that combs and tweezers were regular grave offerings in Viking funerals. They were fashioned of bone, antler, or ivory, and indicate that grooming was important even in the midst of filth. To the Vikings, tidy hair and a well-groomed beard were indicators of pride and vigor. They may be coated with sweat, but they would not appear conquered by the sea. Some sailors, according to an intriguing legend, wore ashes and animal fat rubbed into their hair for stiff resistance to the wind. It worked and perhaps also kept lice at bay. You can imagine the scene, men with gray-streaked hair and glistening beards, the smell of smoke and tallow clinging to them like armor. Scientists still debate how often these voyagers truly washed. Some argue they bathed weekly when near fresh water, while others believe such chances were rare and precious. The sagas refer to Saturday as washing day, which suggests that cleanliness was both routine and ritual. Still, here, in the middle of the ocean, all attempts at hygiene are acts of bravery. You glance around the deck. Salt crystals glint on cloaks as if with frost. The planks glisten with seawater and oil. A woman scrapes the deck with a fragment of broken shell humming to herself. The scent of wet wool and smoke fills your lungs, heavy but oddly reassuring. Sweat was part of their body heat also. The process of rowing, hauling ropes, or pounding nails kept blood circulating. Their bodies were their fireplaces. When a man ceases to work, another bellows for him to get moving. Resting means being cold. Motion is life. It is a continual compromise between fatigue and survival. A man walks by with a small vessel that contains herbs soaked in oil. He applies it under their noses. The smell cuts, nearly sweet. When you inquire, he tells you it covers up the odor of fish and corpses. Juniper, pine, or possibly mint are probably part of the blend. These plants were familiar to the Norse by their purifying and calming action. You smell it and all at once the air doesn't seem so heavy. Histories of the time support that Vikings brought herbs such as thyme and angelica for both flavor and wellness. These were their breath fresheners, antibiotics, and deodorizers in one. Out here, such tiny particulars made for dignity. During the quiet pauses between waves, the noises on the ship become intimate. You hear the rub of combs through hair, the snap of bone against bone, the soft rumble of talk. It's domestic, nearly tender. These individuals, usually envisioned as savage pillagers, are instead tidy and cautious in their habits. Dirt is certain, but filth is not destiny. Someone chuckles at your guarded movements. You'll learn, he explains. The sea gives back what it demands. Sweat, salt, and sleep all do the same thing out here. His smile reveals a gap where two teeth used to be. You smile again, understanding that humor once more is survival. Throughout the day, the stench of bodies intensifies, then somehow vanishes as your senses adjust. You can feel your own skin grow coarse, your hair become brittle, your lips crack at the corners. The ocean is transforming you into one of them. You have learned not to wince at the filth, nor to find solace where none is to be found. No one completely agrees how they survived such conditions for weeks. Some researchers assert the cold inhibited bacterial growth, rendering infection uncommon. Others credit their robust immune systems and plain diets. Either way, it is obvious that the Vikings' interaction with their bodies was pragmatic, not emotional. They embraced discomfort as an inherent part of life, not an adversary to be battled. That evening, the deck is still, the acridity of tar blends with the wisp of herbs and smoke. A sailor brushes his hair in moonlight, the bristles of his brush snagging on tangles. He stops, shuffles the strands into the ocean and smiles as if to say, "Let the ocean have it." You realize that here even cleaning is a communal act with nature. You stretch your creaking limbs and fill your lungs with cold air. Your body is raw but alive, your senses heightened. Every stroke, every scent, every sound is all part of one tapestry of living. The Vikings didn't distinguish between life and the elements. They merged into them. You recline and shut your eyes. The deck groans beneath you like a slow rhythm. Sweat and brine stick to your skin, but you no longer mind. The cold presses in, but you are warm in the only sense that counts, from motion, from laughter, from being simply a part of this obstinate tribe of the sea. Next morning the sea is steel-colored. The clouds drape low, heavy and gray, and the world seems smaller, quiet, but there is movement everywhere. The sails flutter, the creak of oars, the stab of a gull high overhead. You stand by the prow and see the horizon move with each wave's crest. There are no charts where you are, only memory and intuition. The Vikings read the sky and the sea like other people read books. Archaeological evidence from ship graves and coastal settlements indicates that these sailors had few navigational tools, no compasses, no detailed maps. They used instead what nature provided: the wind direction, the wave pattern, and the flight of birds. You attempt to visualize memorizing the world like this, not as lines and figures but as sensations. One captain sent a raven out of a cage to search for land, according to a bizarre tale in the sagas. If it flew back, they were still far from shore. If it flew on and never returned, they followed it. The story seems naive, but it catches something real. The Vikings believed in where they were like a living map. There is debate among scientists regarding how precisely they read the weather. Some claim to have used the hue of sunlight on water to forecast wind shifts, and others claim to have sensed the air pressure in their bones. You can understand why the controversy is unresolved. These were individuals sensitive to particulars too fine to put down, feelings that existed in muscle and intuition. The sailor next to you squints up at the clouds. "Storm in a day," he says. The others grunt in assent. You glance up but notice nothing out of the way. Then you see how the gulls have all ceased crying and the water seems heavier under the hull. A cold trickle runs down the mast of your spine that is not cold. They start preparing without haste, each acting as though reciting an unseen script. Sails are tightened, ropes inspected, shields brought to the edge for cover. You see this quiet proficiency as a form of language. No bellowed commands, no panic, but faith in each other and in the rhythm of the sea. Accounts of the medieval era speak of Viking navigators as sea-wise. That two-word phrase, so straightforward, is telling. They did not conquer the sea, they comprehended it. They observed the hue of clouds at dawn, the twinkle of plankton at night, even whales' mode of travel. Nature's signs were used as their guide. One unusual custom covered in oral tradition is tasting sea water. Sampling the water, experienced mariners said they could determine whether land was in sight. Fresh water from rivers slightly changed the salt content. You don't believe it until you attempt it. The flavor is piercing, salty and strange, but you can almost sense finding something new, a trace of sweetness that suggests land. The people nearby start talking about wind. The helmsman mutters, nodding with his chin to a distant line on the horizon. He is looking at something unseen. "Southwest," he says, and the crew tacks the sail. The ropes groan, the wood creaks, and the ship stirs like an animal. You start to realize how sound contours their universe. The lash of waves on the hull, the flutter of sail, the whine of air through ropes, all these are a vocabulary of alarm. The Vikings heard sign and sounds you might not hear. When the sea spat, it warned them of icy spray. When it clanged hollow under the hull, it was deep water. A light drizzle starts falling. The droplets smart your face, cold and cutting. You rub your eyes, but the crew do not notice. One of the rumors that rain before noon signals fair weather at night. You wonder how long it took several generations to figure out that cycle. Historians remark that Viking navigators also observed the flight of seabirds, particularly puffins and gulls. These birds were known to return to land at dusk, so if flocks flew low and then disappeared, land was near. You picture the hope of seeing a lone bird after weeks of nothing but empty sky, a fluttering sign of home. An older seaman reveals to you something that appears to be in translucent crystal. It catches the dim light and scatters it in pale streaks. "Sunstone," he says. He holds it toward the gray sky, turns it slowly and nods. There, he adds, the sun hides but the stone finds it. Scientists today have found that certain minerals can polarize light, making the sun's direction visible even through thick clouds. The trick was real, not just legend. By late afternoon, the drizzle ceases and the deck glistens. The air is clean, tinged with an almost metallic smell. The sailors shift without effort, sure that the storm will pass them by. You understand how knowledge becomes comfort here. Where you see turmoil, they see a map. The ship rides through pale water, and the wind moans low in the rigging. You can sense how the Vikings organized their existence around this sound, how it must have sung in their sleep. They lived according to its temper, relied on it more than a star. When evening comes, the clouds scatter, and a pale strip of color runs across the sky. The helmsman smiles, content. "Fair weather at last," he says. You sense warmth in his confidence, the kind of warmth that is born of mastery, not temperature. You glance up at the sky, now sprinkled with pale stars. Every one appears to hum of another journey, another icy dawn. The sea has turned into a teacher, and you're just learning its lessons. The next morning starts with hunger. It is a dull pain initially, merely an emptiness that vibrates softly below the ribs. Cold exacerbates it, feeding off the heat of your body. You see the crew rouse as gray light pours over the deck. Someone lifts the lid of a wooden chest, and the scent of dried fish wafts through the air. It is pungent, salty, and oddly sweet. Breakfast has come. Archaeological findings in Viking towns in Greenland and Iceland indicate that such navigators had plain but ingenious provisions: dried/smoked fish, hard bread, cheese which had turned to stone, and preserved meat in barrels as their staple fare. They ate for sustenance, not for pleasure. Every meal was made to last weeks without going bad, even when frozen solid. They occasionally boiled up seaweed to thicken stews, It provided texture and salt, and during times of hardship filled bellies. You picture that odor, earthy and salty, twisting through the cold air. There is debate among scholars regarding how much variety their diets actually consisted of. They propose they ate primarily fish, others that they transported grain for porridge and even small supplies of dried fruit. Whatever, their diet was influenced by the sea and by practicality. Not fancy, all utilitarian. You eat next to a sailor paring thin slices of dried cod with a knife smooth from sharpening over years. He dips it into molten butter that shimmers gold in the dawn light. Strength food, he tells you. You bite into it. It is chewy and salty and full of fat. It's like eating heat itself. Fat was their secret against the cold. Whale blubber, seal fat, and butter were all coveted. These thick calories were burned slowly in the body, warming where warmth was needed most. Without them, even the bravest fighter would tremble into weakness. Archaeological evidence attests to the fact that Vikings took butter barrels and animal fat kegs on long expeditions. In cold seas, these were more precious than gold. You can understand why. Each mouthful is power, each spoonful a tiny fire against the cold. A strange tradition of the sagas has sailors exchanging bits of dried fish like others exchange coins. Both food and money. To eat it meant friendship. To withhold it might initiate a feud. You glance around and see this miniature economy at work, one man passing another a piece of smoked herring, a tacit expression of trust. The more the day wears on, the cooking starts. A little brazier is lit, wind breaks around it. The cook pours dried meat, onions, and water into an iron pot. The aroma drifts up slowly, smoky and comforting. Steam winds around the air, relaxing faces and voices both. You understand the strength of food when the world is locked up tight around you. A woman spoons broth into wooden bowls. The initial taste stings your tongue, but you embrace the discomfort. The heat seeps downward, slow and gradual, into places the flames would never reach. It is sustenance, yes, but comfort as well. The Vikings bore no heaters, no blankets wide enough to withstand the northern cold. What they ate, what they held is true, and who they were with provided their warmth. Icelandic records speak of fermented shark, a delicacy of necessity, buried under sand for months, which changed from toxin to nourishment. The thought makes your belly turn over, but you marvel at the ingenuity. When there is nothing that grows and the sea is icy, survival requires ingenuity. You observe the cook clean out the last particles from the pot and add melted tallow to seal it against the air. Even rubbish is resource. Every bit of fat, every scrap of bread counts. The sailors joke that Odin himself sanctified the butter, for without it half of them would be frozen hard before spring. Scholars are still debating whether alcohol was routinely drunk at sea. Some believe that little casks of ale or mead were brought aboard for morale and hydration purposes. Others believe that fresh water was more precious. Whatever the case, someone now opens up a skin and shares it around. The drink is hot, flavored with honey, and stings your throat. The subsequent laughter is as if another type of heat. As the sun sets low, you notice how meals give structure to their lives. Work is suspended for meals, voices relax, and for a short time, the vast sea of water appears distant. They eat, spit out the food, and smile. It is a humble ceremony, but it unites them as surely as twine holds the mast. The chill comes back swiftly as soon as the final bowl is drained. The brazier dies out and breath comes visible again, but something in you has changed. You see now that heat is not always something you discover outside of yourself. It sometimes develops inside, ignited by food, by thankfulness, by the small flame of being alive. You sit against the hull of the ship and gaze at the stars just coming out. The salt and butter taste on your lips. Behind you, the crew quiets to soft murmurs, bellies full and spirits calm. You consider how these same stars stood watch over other journeys, other meals, other laughter around steaming kettles. The wind exhales, the sea whines, and the ship moves forward. The heat of the meal still lingers in your chest, resisting the cold. You shut your eyes and hear the distant clink of bowls, the satisfied rumble, and the timeless beat of survival that has nourished humankind since the first fire burned. The days run together now, a beat of wind, water, and waking chill. Every morning you wake to a world that appears the same but feels a little different. The air cuts, the sky is heavier, and your breath becomes silver mist. To survive here isn't as much about strength, but about a struggle of the mind. You see it in their faces. The Vikings walk with intent, but there is something harder to put your finger on behind their eyes. It is focused certainly, but calm as well. They have embraced the cold as a part of life. You see that such acceptance is what distinguishes them from other people who would break under such chill. Saga remnants and historical accounts imply that Norse mariners conditioned themselves psychologically for adversity from their childhood. Winter taught them. Kids learned to stand pain, to labor in snow, to barefoot across ice briefly, just to harden skin and will. Pain was not punishment but preparation. It says in one of the ancient Norse poems, "Better to be burned than frozen, because fire leaves ashes but ice steals memory." The line remains with you as you see a man mend his or with stiff fingers. He whistles softly as if the act itself preserves his sanity. Historians still argue today whether this people considered endurance virtue or mere need. Some believe it was tied to their pagan beliefs, where suffering earned divine favor. Others think it was merely the logic of survival in a world that offered no mercy. Whatever the truth, you can feel it in their movements. Calm persistence. Never complaint. You sit beside a young sailor whose face is pale with cold. He grins when you ask if he ever feels afraid. Fear dissipates heat, he claims. You are not sure if he is being serious, but you get him. Anxiety consumes energy, and energy is life. Archaeological evidence suggests the place of collective spirit in this survival. Individual sites tend to include twos or groups of individuals, which indicates collective identity even in death. It is an expression of a worldview in which individual survival depended on the health of the group. Alone, one perished. They lived through it together. An interesting custom referred to in some of the sagas has warriors sleeping deliberately without cloaks for a single night prior to voyages, referring to it as the cold trial. It tried character and trained the body to cope. You shiver at the prospect, but you also respect the odd discipline. At nightfall, you can feel the weight of fatigue. The brain drifts to thoughts of home, of roaring fires and comfortable beds. You think of how homesickness must have been for them out of land for weeks. Maybe they made it into something strong, thinking of their families not as something they'd lost, but something that would make them push on rowing. The ship sways back and forth, and the world blurs into one of gray and blue. You shut your eyes and hear whispers of chatter floating on the chill air. There are some who speak of raids and kinks. Others recite lines from memory. Storytelling itself is a protection against hopelessness. Written accounts speak of the importance of poetry and song to the Viking way of life. To recite a saga was more than entertainment. It was identity reaffirmed. It reminded every person who they were, even when the ocean sought to forget them. You can feel that truth today. Every sentence is a warmth. Every chuckle a spark in the blackness. A fellow named Torvald starts singing softly. His voice is hoarse but consistent, growing and declining to the beat of waves. The ditty is about frost and flame, about lost ships and born souls. You can't catch every word, but the tune envelopes you like a blanket. There's debate among contemporary scholars regarding whether or not these songs were improvised or memorized. Some believe the verses varied with each journey, reformed by wind and recollection. You prefer that notion that each song had bits of other winters, other survivors. The mind becomes conditioned to the cold, you know. It resists at first, learns to flow later, make amends. The body trembles but the mind stabilizes. This equilibrium is what sustains the Vikings. They do not attempt to conquer the cold, integrate it into their beat. You try it out yourself. You take in deep breaths, feel the burn in the lungs and do not struggle against it. Pain mellowed into perception. The cold is less foe, more friend. For an instant you experience what they must have experienced, a curious quietness, a still satisfaction in merely being in the tempest. The darkness quiets, the wind sighs and the hull creaks slowly. You recline, cloak drawn close, and see frost creep fine lines over the wood. Your mind wanders more slowly now, gentler. You know that this is not suffering, it is endurance made beautiful. You recall the words of an old sailor who spoke to you earlier in the day, "Fire burns out but ice remembers." You ponder what that portends. Maybe every cold night, every harsh journey leaves its impression not just on the flesh but on history itself. The cold keeps both flesh and memory alive. You shut your eyes, both fragile and immortal, borne forward on a vessel of unyielding hearts and unfaltering hands. The Viking spirit is not tender, but it is vibrant, burning softly in the vast blackness. Dawn comes pale and shaking, a weak light seeping through fog so dense you can taste it. The sea is still today, weighted with fog. All sound is muted, the groan of wood, the rustle of canvas, even voices muffled as though uttered from beneath water. The men go slower now, resting and speaking softly to each other. You sense something different in the atmosphere, a sort of respect. The Vikings were not merely sailors and warriors, they were believers. Each journey started with ceremonies to appease sea and wind gods. For this one, they would have spilled mead into the sea for Njord, ocean god, and possibly left offerings for Thor, whose hammer protected travelers from storms. Religion to them was not theoretical or remote, it was a collaboration with forces that enveloped them. Archaeologists have found carved Thor's hammer amulets and concluded that the symbols weren't ornamentation. They were traveling prayers around necks and cloaks, occasionally attached to the mast itself. You see one of them now, gently swaying from the rigging, its silver darkened with age. The man who left it there looks at it constantly as though it listens in return. It is said, in a bizarre record retained in Icelandic legend, that certain captains made an offering of a small animal before departing, expecting its blood to subdue the waves. Whether symbolic or literal, it is impossible to say, but the meaning is apparent. Survival was work both physical and spiritual. Experts are still unsure how far the typical Viking accepted these rituals. Some argue that rituals were mostly tradition, kept alive out of respect for ancestry. Others suggest that, on the open sea, where death could come from a single rogue wave, faith became tangible. You can see why. Out here, the ocean itself feels alive, watching, waiting. As fog thickens, the crew grows quiet. One man mutters a charm against drowning. Another rubs a bead between his fingers, speaking softly a name you are not able to hear. The air vibrates softly with whispered words, and the fire of superstition. The world was seen by the Vikings as tiered. Overhead was Asgard, heaven of gods and warriors. Below, the underworld of hell. Between was Midgard, the world of men, a thin thread of earth and sea. The sea was path and danger, a boundary over which spirits could travel. Each journey was, in effect, a crossing from one world to another. A strange story in a Greenland saga tells of mariners encountering lights beneath the sea, lights that they attributed to the spirits of men drowned at sea escorting them home. Some contemporary scientists believe that the lights might have been bioluminescent plankton, but the sailors witnessed souls, not science. Their universe was a world of significance where yours may find only enigma. The ship moves deliberately down through the fog. The sea sounds like a heartbeat down on the ground. You sense the line dissolve between terror and trust, between the things you can feel and the things you can only perceive. The ship's own conviction was a sort of heat, a flame that smoldered in the brain when the flesh was not able to resist the cold. Chronicles of the times speak of sailors inscribing protective runes on the wood of their vessels. These runes, incised with blades or seared into the hull, invoke divine favor for passage. You run your fingers over a subtle carving by the bow. The glyph resembles a staccato arrow, a rune called Algi's protection. You sense a chill that is not of the air. Someone starts to sing, low and relentless. It is not a song for pleasure but calling. The tune swells and dies like the waves themselves, slow, circular, hypnotic. The phrases invoke the ancient gods to protect their way and immobilize the hands of foes. The voices merge until it is something primordial, nearly elemental. Scholars observe that group chanting served to control rhythm on lengthy journeys, but also carried psychological significance. Singing bonded the crew members, synchronized their hearts, and chased fear away. You feel it operating even today. The air is lighter, the fog not so heavy. When the song dies away, silence is restored. The mist clears enough so that you can glimpse pale sunlight spreading over the sea. The Viking next to you grins, white teeth glinting in his beard of frost black. The gods approve, he says matter-of-factly. You don't question how he knows because already you feel the same truth. The terror has diminished, the horizon has come back. A wispy whiff of smoke wafts up as they set a little lamp by the mast alight. Its flame dances, delicate against the gray. Someone adds a dash of desiccated herbs to it, and a slim ring of scented smoke ascends, bearing whispers on the wind. You notice this is a sort of prayer as well, a method of sending thanks into the air. Contemporary historians read these rites as something greater than superstition. They were means of emotional survival. Religion made sense of suffering, order out of chaos, and bravery to the scared, on a sea that could engulf them at any moment. The Vikings gained mastery in belief. You shut your eyes and listen to the rhythm of the sea against the ship. The fog still rises, showing pale sunlight that shines like silver on the ripples. You think that somewhere in it, the gods hear still, amused or perhaps fond of their frostbitten children below. When you look again, the mist is gone. The crew walk with renewed vigor, shoulders straighter, voices stronger. Whether they had been heard or answered, it is of no importance. It is the same outcome. The journey goes on and hope accompanies it. When the next dawn crawls over the horizon, the mist is gone. All that is left is the sheen of the ship itself, the long and slender form which has borne you through cold and dread. You begin to think of it not as a craft but as a friend. Its timbers groan like breath, and when the waves slam against it, it trembles as if alive. This is where most of the Vikings' real warmth starts, in their craftsmanship. Archaeological excavation of ship graves, like at Oseberg in Gokstad, shows an extent of engineering that amazed even today's builders. Each plank overlaps the one next to it, secured by iron rivets that yield with the movement of the sea. The method, known as clinker construction, enables the hull to flex instead of shattering. You trace the palm of one of the seams with your hand, sensing the beat of human craftsmanship in each groove. As described by ancient accounts retained in Norse sagas, each vessel received a name as though it were a person. Some had rough-sounding names such as sea serpent or wave stallion. The concept was not poetry only. It illustrated the assumption that a ship possessed spirit, breath, and memory. Prior to the initial voyage, shipbuilders bestowed blessings to rouse that spirit and safeguard its sailors. Historians remain contentious as to whether or not these ship blessings were popular. Some believe they were uncommon, only given to great voyages or chiefs. Others feel that even modest boats had simple rights. Grand or modest, every ship was imbued with years of shared experience that had been shaped by survival. Excavations also indicate that craftworkers chose wood with near reverence. Oak for the keel, pine for the planks, birch for tiny fittings. Each was picked in winter when sap was low, and so less apt to rot. The selection itself became part of the soul of the ship. You envision the aroma of sawdust and resin in a winter forest as hands molded fate from green wood. A curious discovery along a fjord in Norway yielded patterns of animal hair and tar incorporated into the seams. Scholars believe the Vikings utilized whatever they could to water seal the hull, from sheep's wool to reindeer fat. What resulted was an elastic sealant that stood against both water and ice. The vessel upon which you stand needs to have that same smell: pine, tar, and mild musk. It is strangely reassuring, like smoke on a cold winter night. A sailor standing next to you gestures toward the elaborately carved prow, the head of the dragon rising high and proud, its eyes glint dimly, worn smooth by salt and time. She watches, he tells you. You nod, understanding he means it. For him, the vessel is not a thing. It is protector, dwelling, and sword all in one. Modern reports from foreign lands speak of how Viking vessels looked frightful on the horizon. The curved bow was alive, bounding over waves as if hungry for combat. You can perceive how such craftsmanship would have struck or into the eyes of those who beheld it for the first time, yet from within it feels delicate, a creation of harmony between force and elegance. A strange tradition spoken of in ancient nautical lore involves sailors thanking their ships in hushed tones after weathering storms. They would place a touch upon the hull and vow to repair or make offerings upon land. A dialogue between creator and creation, thanksgiving etched in quiet. You catch yourself wanting to do the same, placing your own hand on the heat-warmed wood as if it could hear. Sailors continue to wonder how the Vikings prevented their ships from freezing. Some believe they used blades and oars to scrape frost off, others that they oiled the planks before setting out. Either method required constant maintenance. Every sailor was warrior and maintainer, taking care of the ship as one would the family. You stroll along the deck and see that every detail serves a purpose. The planks slope upwards towards the center so water can escape. The benches also serve as a storage compartment, concealing spare ropes and tools. Even the sail, woolly thick, captures air pockets that cushion the wind's brutality. Each feature tells of minds familiar with the sea's fury and designing for pity. When wind blows, the ship responds with a long sigh that resonates through your soles. It is almost like a voice, weary and old but faithful. You can envision how many tempests it has endured, how many prayers have permeated its grain. The consideration is humbling. Historians explain that these vessels were an extension of their creator's persona. To build one was to announce dominion over both substance and destiny. Every blow of the hammer was an oath of return. The longship, then, was the Vikings' greatest invention, not merely a weapon of war or commerce but a crossing between human will and the boundless cold. You sit close to the prow, where the wood is dry and sun-hardened. The dragon head stretches a long shadow across the water. Below you the hull shifts like muscle, curling with each wave. You understand that this is warmth of a different sort, the warmth of faith in one's work. The Vikings had faith in their ships as you might have faith in your heartbeat. As night falls once more, there appear stars, sparkling like frost sprinkled on velvet. The ship moves softly under them, a black outline against silver light. You stroke your hand again along the wooden railing, feeling the indentations made by centuries of palms that preceded yours. They all belong to someone who crossed the same seas, experienced the same chill and took refuge in this living mass of oak and tar. When you close your eyes, you hear the creak of the hull against the waves, soft and persistent, like air through an old flute. The boat speaks with its own tongue, assuring you it will take you a little further along before dawn. You trust it? The night slips by in fitful quiet. The water becomes smooth and the breeze dies down, so quiet that each breath is amplified. You catch yourself hearing the faintest noises, the trickle of water off the sail, the rustle of rope against wood. Above you the stars move slowly. Sleep here is not profound. It ebbs and flows like the tide. The Vikings possessed no beds on their vessels, no soft furs, no cover from the wind. They slept where they sat, bundled in woolen cloaks wedged between oars, cargo, and comrades. When fatigue came, they merely closed their eyes and let the tossing of the waves sweep them into dreams. You attempt the same, sensing the rhythm in your bones, half habit, half menace. Archaeological evidence from intact shipwrecks indicates that a few long ships featured small raised deck or covered areas close to the stern where commanders could sleep, but the majority of the crew slept out in the open. Their only bed was animal hides, cloaks, and straw mats. The divide between sleep and wakefulness became indistinguishable, much as the divide between danger and safety. On the authority of a past sailor's legend, sailors often slept by alternate turns of 2 hours, their slumber coordinated with the rhythm of oars. The vessel itself dictated their routine. You can picture it, breathing sounds intermingled with or splashes, a lullaby composed of toil. It is still argued by researchers how they survived sleeping dry on nights like these. There are some who believe that they slept under tarred leather sheets to keep them from spray. Others think that they tolerated damp as inevitable and used body heat as well as wool to dry out what the sea wetted. Whatever the reality, it must have been a mind as solid as iron to sleep through nights like these. You see a man settled down next to you, tucking his cloak over his head. His face is gone, only his beard visible under the cloth. Another moves in closer, their shoulders almost touching. There is no shyness, no hesitation. Shared heat is survival. Privacy has no room here. Archaeological evidence from Viking burials reveals that individuals were sometimes buried with blankets or thick wool cloaks, a hint that even in death, warmth was holy. To them, the covering of the body was protection, a final act of mercy against the cold of eternity. You think about it as you close your own cloak tighter. A strange tradition described in one of the sagas has the sailors putting hot stones heated by fire under their cloaks before they sleep. The stones cooled rapidly, but the act was more important than the consequence. It was an act of defiance against the cold, a vow of grieving. The wind carries a whiff of smoke and sea salt. In the distance a deep voice sings a tune too quiet to identify. The music floats over the deck between the sleeping bodies. It is haunting and it is calming. You shut your eyes, feeling it hum deep in your chest. Historians are not sure what dreams the Vikings held as important. Some accounts refer to dreams as communications from gods or relatives. Others dismiss them as mere product of the imagination. Out here, with stars and sea for companionship, you imagine they must have believed in both. A dream could be instruction or it could be a test. You float between sleep and waking. The wood you lie on is chilled, yet heat from bodies close by permeates through. Breath mixes and the air mists gently with each breath out. You sense the beat of the ship, slow and peaceful, as if it were breathing in concert with you. Someone rolls over, mumbling asleep. Another coughs. The noise sounds vast in the silence. Then silence once more, the sort that weighs against your ears until you listen to the beat of your own heart. You picture the thousands of nights just like this one that long ago unfolded on the northern seas, each a dark test of endurance against fatigue and ice. Written accounts report that some Viking vessels transported bear or reindeer furs, bartered from the north. These hides provided luxury warmth, reserved for captains or experienced sailors. You imagine the heavy pelts, oily with weight, filled with the scent of wilderness and power. Being touched by one would have been like leaning against a memory of land. When you attempt to sleep, you find a rhythm. Breathe in the salt air. Breathe out the tension. The body comes to know the ship's rhythms, anticipating each ascent and descent. Your mind tracks the pattern until thought itself bleeds into movement. You are not a visitor here anymore. You are one of the slow, deep respirations of the journey. A cold drop touches your cheek. You look and there is frost on the railing, glinting in the dim starlight. The water around you fluoresces softly green with unseen organisms in the darkness beneath. Bioluminescent plankton stream behind the hull like floating stars. You understand that in the blackest night, there is light in the world if you stand still enough to notice it. Some scientists think that sailors viewed the glowing water as good luck signs, omens that the gods were close. Others suppose they just appreciated them for their own sake. Whatever, the view is mesmerizing. You see the lights dance until your eyes shut once more. When morning eventually breaks, you are stiff, cold, but living. The first light of morning slices across the deck, making frost into glitter. The sleepers wake, yawn, and smile weakly. For another day they have survived. You understand that sleep itself, though brief or uncomfy, is an act of faith, the assumption that morning will break and the sea will remain to hold them. You rise, your cloak weighed down with dew, and gaze at the horizon. The ship groans, waves whisper, and a pale sun rises. The cold persists, but so does the warmth inside you, generated by trust, exhaustion, and the relentless thrum of survival. The morning sky is a white burn, the sort of brightness that seems colder than shade. You move slowly, all joints creaking, your breath a tenuous mist ahead of you. Behind you the crew glides with smooth silence. Someone coughs, another spits salt into the ocean, and the day starts. Life here is never paused, only rhythm, but whenever there is something amiss with the body, then rhythm becomes brittle. Archaeological discoveries of settlements in Scandinavia reveal evidence of herbal remedies kept in clay vessels and animal horns. These remains inform you that even in adverse environments, the Vikings took knowledge of healing with them. They were not just warriors but also thoughtful observers of nature. From ancient sagas and scraps of medical manuscripts, we know that sea travelers carried with them bundles of dry herbs like yarrow, angelica, and juniper. Yarrow closed wounds, angelica was an antibacterial, and juniper eased creaking joints. You can picture those little bundles wrapped up in string, their aromas blending in with the smell of salt and smoke. There is debate among experts as to how much of this medicine was based on experience and how much on faith. Some believe Viking healers actually knew the effects of the plant, others that ritual and superstition made up for the gaps science could not. Maybe both are correct, for here, on the moving sea, every cure needs hope as well as skill. A seaman next to you flinches, his red and cracked hands cold. Another woman produces a small jar from her belt and opens it. There is a paste the color of honey inside. She applies it to his skin. The aroma is pungent and earthy, a combination of fat, ash, and powdered herbs. Boar fat repels the frost, she says. You rub a bit on your own hands and it burns before soothing. Historian records in Iceland write of similar salves composed of animal fat and a mixture of moss and resin. The fat closed wounds and repelled infection, while the moss gave gentle antiseptic strength. The Vikings understood healing was not indulgence, it was survival. An ailing or hurt sailor could spell doom for the crew. One strange tradition cited in an ancient Norse poem involves applying cold stones to bruises to extract the fire of pain. You chuckle to realize using ice to cure in a world already cold. But the reasoning is sound. Cold numbs, preserves, stabilizes. They make the cruelty of the sea into medicine. Researchers still talk about how they treated deeper wounds. Some tell of cauterizing the wounds with hot iron, others of wrapping them in clean wool saturated with urine, which carries natural ammonia. It's not nice to think about, but necessity doesn't leave space for revulsion. Each millimeter of knowledge was garnered from generations who learned the hard way through trial and error and holding on through it all. As daylight increases, you observe the crew sharing what little comfort they have. One man rubs his arms to keep blood flowing. Another washes a minor cut in seawater. The sting of salt, but he hardly flinches. They know that pain is the currency of staying alive, a language their bodies learn so well. You remember that in Norse mythology, even the gods bore scars. Odin traded an eye for wisdom. Tyr lost a hand to secure the wolf Fenrir. Strength was never being perfect. It was being able to keep going while being broken. You sense that truth settled deep within you as the ship sways beneath your feet. A peculiar memory floats to mind from earlier tales. Sailors chewing on pieces of birch bark to ease toothaches. Birch has natural oils which are antiseptic in nature. The Vikings had no knowledge of the chemistry, but they knew relief when they sensed it. They noticed, recalled, and passed on their knowledge to their children. The acrid scent of burning fat wafts from a tiny brazier. Someone is heating a vessel of water with herbs added to it, generating steam that mollifies the air. The crew inhale it, eyes closed, as if it is a blessing. You go to join them, and the heat caresses your face, defrosting the tiny frost on your lashes. For an instant, spring seems to have snuck on board. Nobody completely concurs in the manner they coped with severe sickness on extended journeys. Some reports indicate that the unwell were abandoned at local settlements where opportunities permitted. Others suggest that in case of death at sea, the body was sent to the waves, clothed in prayer and fabric. The sea took them as it had brought them to life. You attempt to envision that moment. The stillness as the corpse slips into the sea, the flash of cloth before it disappears. The Vikings did not perceive any distinction between land and ocean, life and death. It all cycled back the same way. When afternoon gives way to twilight, a soft glow appears on the horizon. The men find a little respite. All of them laugh, a soft sound which pierces the tedium of waves. Healing is more than herbs and bandages, you understand. It is laughter, shared suffering, the steady beat of friendship. The woman who tended to the earlier sailor now sings a melody as she loads her little pouch. You get a whiff of juniper once more, biting and pure. She looks up, smiles and says, "The sea also heals if it doesn't kill." Her voice is soft, almost teasing, yet her eyes are heavy with years of truth. Night descends slowly. You sit beside the brazier, sensing the final wisps of its warmth against the palms of your hands. The crew around you settles into silence, each lost in contemplation. The air is heavy with smoke and salt, and deep within, you sense a serene acquiescence settling. The Vikings knew survival involved something greater than bravery. It required tender care, understanding, and belief that any wound of flesh or spirit could be healed. You observe the final flicker disappear into blackness, the ocean whisper beneath the boat, and you believe maybe healing is less about removing ache, but about finding a way to bear it on into the next morning. Before dawn, the ocean exhales slightly softer. The ice that stuck to the sides of the boat has started melting, dripping into little puddles that reflect the dim light. You notice the smell of salt and fur combined with the distant musk of animals. When you glance forward, you finally see the origin of that feeling of warmth that is almost alive. The Vikings were never so alone on their voyages. Archaeological records in graves and coastal digs indicate dogs, hawks, and on occasion livestock traveled along with Norse sailors. They were companions, guardians, and animate sources of heat. You see a dog huddled against the foot of a sailor, its coat heavy and golden in the morning sunday. The man absently scratches its ear, both of them complacent. In accordance with a report that has been preserved in early Norse poetry, dogs were appreciated for more than just protection. A loyal hound on board was believed to pacify the sea. You smile at superstition, but when the dog raises its head and looks over the horizon, you nearly believe it. There is some debate among historians regarding how many creatures traveled over long distances. Some believe livestock were taken along for milk and meat on shorter voyages, while others believe only necessary animals like dogs or trained birds crossed. The truth, as ever, is probably somewhere in the middle. You can quite easily picture a ship buzzing with noise, dogs barking, sheep bleating, wings flapping in the breeze. The hawks were status and ability symbols. A falcon sitting on a captain's wrist identified him as both noble and disciplined. The birds were taught to chase small game at coastal stops, serving up fresh meat when provisions ran low. You imagine the blur of feathers against gray sky, a flash of life in all this cold. One odd detail in one of the sagas describes sailors giving dogs bits of dried fish pounded into snow to give them water. The vision causes you shudder inwardly, chuckle softly. Even the animals had partaken in the discovery of weird meals. A distant sound distracts you, sirens groaning far down the ship. You descend the little ladder and discover two goats roped up alongside the cargo. Their breath puffs up like steam and their little bodies give off astonishing heat. The air is warmer here, filled with life. You see how smart this is? Even animal presence in winter becomes insulation. Local history records that Vikings frequently took goats or sheep on ships not only as a source of milk but as warmth. Their bodies warmed the lower deck into a living furnace. In exchange, the crew offered scraps and tenderness. It was a silent partnership of endurance. You sit beside the animals and listen to their gentle bleats. The noise is rhythmic, calming. The ship groans above, and for a moment it feels as though you are within the chest of some giant creature, all heartbeats and breath. You touch a goat's rough fur. It is cold but living, a reminder that sometimes warmth can be found in simple, wordless presence. Sailors occasionally used animal hair to wear as linings for gloves and boots, pairing comfort and function. A clever note in a medieval travel story relates. And now it makes sense, feeling the dense undercoat. Nature had a use for every part of itself on a Viking ship. Scientists still debate whether cats accompanied their owners on ships. Some evidence points to them doing so, not only for companionship but to keep pest populations down. Grain stored for trade or food drew rodents, and cats made sure it remained secure. You look in the direction of a barrel and half expect to see eyes glowing in the dark. Having animals around altered more than the weather. It lulled the air, a dog's howl, a goat's moan. Even the hawk's scream gave voice to emptiness. The men addressed them as if speaking to old acquaintances. In a world dominated by frost and doubt, these animals brought back memories of home and earth, of the blaze of a hearth. A sailor named Leif kneels to feed the dog beside him. "You saved me once," he says softly. You ask how, and he reports the tale of a storm that ripped the sail in two. The dog had barked a moment before the initial wave crashed over them, allowing them to get to the ropes. Luck or instinct, it has become a legend. It occurs to you that the Vikings' interaction with animals is parallel to their interaction with the sea. Both are mysterious, strong, and highly regarded. They did not master these cohorts. They worked together. You see it in each movement, each contact between human and animal. An old talisman documented in Norse mythology invokes the souls of wolves and bears to grant courage. Maybe by traveling with hounds and hawks, they thought they had pieces of those fierce powers with them. The human and animal bond was not emotional but metaphysical, integrated into the cadence of existence and survival. As dusk approaches, you hear laughter as the dog staggers across the deck, pursuing a length of rope. Even battle-hardened warriors grin, their faces relaxing in the light of gold. You see that happiness is also heat, that friendship, human or animal, repels despair. When night comes around again, you sleep beside the lower deck once more, your ears tuned to the gentle breathing of humans and animals. The atmosphere is different here, thick with relaxation instead of chill. The goats change position in their sleep, the dog emits a sigh, and the ship murmurs gently. You close your eyes, your mind picturing the many centuries of sailings when such sounds filled the darkness. The Vikings might have encountered a never-ending winter, but they never sailed alone in the way that truly matters. Warmth, it appears, was always in living breathing form among them, pulsing in fur and feather, shared breath and faithful heart. The darkness closes until the horizon melts away and the sea is one rolling mirror of black steel. The wind dies down for once, leaving the vessel in ghostly silence. You can hear all sounds now, the soft lap of water, the quiet thud of ropes moving, the groan of wood that seems to moan with age. In the distance a voice starts humming. Music had a way of warming up the chill, and for Vikings sound was as vital as food or fire. It provided rhythm to rowing, bravery to fear, and recall to stillness. You hear as one of the sailors picks up a small instrument, a lyre whose strings are made of animal intestine. Sounds ascends tentative at first, then become sure, tracing in the air like smoke from a concealed flame. Archaeological evidence of musical instruments from sites such as Berk and Hedderby proves Vikings transported lyres, flutes, and horns. They were not just to be celebrated, but they were instruments of concentration, devices that determined the morale of the crew. A tune could bring them back home or steady their hands in the darkness. Sailors, as according to an ancient poem in the Codex Regius, believed that sound was powerful itself. The correct tune could summon fair winds or lull sea demons to sleep. You remember that now as the song floats out over the water, half lullaby, half prayer. Scholars disagree over whether the music was improvised or was part of an oral tradition passed down from generation to generation. Some say every crew had their own songs as the journey progressed. Others say some melodies were holy, sung back exactly as passed down from ancestors. Either way, the important thing is the act of singing, the rebellion of sound against silence. The lyre player closes his eyes, his body swaying just a little. The others around him start to sing along, their voices raw and deep. They chant rather than sing, each note vibrating like the heart of the ship. You sense it through the planks under your feet, through the soles of your feet, through the beat in your chest. Accounts by medieval travelers describe how Viking hymns traveled across the sea long before the ships themselves appeared. Picture yourself on a distant shore, and to hear that eerie music on the breeze, something that was neither threat nor greeting, merely something greater than either. One of the strange beliefs described in the north told that the sea was able to echo human voices. The sailors heard echoes of their own singing in the sound of crashing waves, the sea responding to them. Scientists now would describe it as acoustics, but to sailors who took to sea upon these waters, it was a warning that the sea listened. As the music goes on, you observe how the chill becomes milder, breathing synchronizes with the melody, and your own body starts to sway involuntarily. It is a sort of communal trance. The Vikings themselves did not have warmth and plenty, but they composed harmony, and harmony warms the soul. A mariner whispers to you that there are melodies for the living, some for the dead. He talks of funeral songs sung when comrades were drowned at sea. The sound was believed to escort their spirits safely to the halls of Valhalla. You can almost picture that now. Voices carried up into the dark, navigating channels among the stars. Scholars indicate that communal singing also had useful purposes. It controlled the rhythm of rowing and relieved the fatigue of long toil. Every line of the verse was a measure of time, every chorus a reminder of no single rower. When the oars rose and fell together as one, the ship itself was an instrument. The wind gets colder and the song changes. Now it is older sounding, more melancholy. The melody turns inward as if recalling a memory. You see that in their music the Vikings preserved their history. Every note contained tales of ancestors, lovers, battles and storms of yesteryears. It was their attempt to make time go in circles instead of lines. An interesting note from a 13th century chronicler speaks about Viking singers taking the rhythm of the sea to determine pitch. They listened to the sound of the waves crashing and tuned it, as if harmonizing with the world. The idea makes you smile. You attempt to hum softly, allowing your voice to merge with the creak of the ship. The winds rustle and the waters sigh. You are briefly part of the chorus. When the song is finished at last, there is silence that wraps over all things like a warm blanket. The crew exhales as one, the enchantment shattered but the heat remaining. Even the sea calms, its surface ruffled with starlight reflections. You can still sense the vibration of the melody in your chest, a soft echo that won't die. No one says anything for a bit and then the helmsman laughs. The sea approved of that one, he says. You glance around and notice small smiles, exhausted but satisfied. In this thin world of ice and waves, laughter and music are the oldest type of heat. Lying back, the deck chill against your spine, you remember the song. The notes hover between imagination and recollection until they are the beat of your heart. The Vikings knew something plain and ageless. Death starts where voices intersect. Even now, hundreds of years later, the sea holds that echo, humming softly under the stars. Morning comes with a slender pink light on the horizon. The sea seems less of a danger now, and more like a mirrored secret keeper. You are among the crew as they hoist the sail, their motions quick but steady. Today there is mention not of gods or storms, but of trade and treasure. The promise of gold sparkles even in the gray light. Ship burials provide evidence that most Viking expeditions were not raids but trading ventures. They sold furs, walrus tusks, amber, and iron in exchange for silk, spices, and silver coins originating from places far warmer than these. The riches they desired were as great a motive for braving the freezing sea as honor or adventure. As reported by an Arab traveler who encountered Norse traders on the Volga River, these Northmen were fierce and yet diligent in trade. They bathed daily, polished their weapons, and haggled with tireless persistence. You picture them doing the same on this ship, balancing their fortunes with each burst of wind. Specialists continue to debate whether raiding or trading enriched them more. Raiding, others claim, provided them with the renown that forged their legend, while trade established the foundations of their actual strength. Observing the crew today, you witness both urges in action, the urge for survival and the urge for plenty. A sailor, Eric, hones a knife on a whetstone, its blade shimmers like a flash of ice. Silver repels the frost, he quips, though there is something more underlying his words. To men who spent half a year on the waves, riches signified something greater than greed. It signified provision for their kin, sustenance during long winters, and esteem among their kind. Archaeological discoveries in Scandinavia show that coins from as distant as Baghdad and Constantinople found their way to be buried in Viking earth. Every statue narrates a voyage over deserts, rivers, and icy seas. You hold one in your mind and sense the warmth of faraway bazaars still lingering on its surface. There is a quaint myth that tells sailors to warm their palms over mounds of silver before they distributed them, asserting that treasure retained the heat of the regions it originated from. It's romantic, but as light falls upon a handful of coins someone is holding now, they also glow very slightly. The crew come round to look at them, their faces gentle with pride. The Vikings did not divide the useful from the holy. Gold and silver were wealth, but also symbols of God's favor. The sagas tell of Freyr, fertility and abundance god, whose favor provided both harvest and commerce. When the sea provided riches back, that was taken as evidence the gods were sanctioning. Monastery records pillaged in Britain refer to how Norsemen spared churches which provided food or ransom. Violence and diplomacy went hand in hand. You can feel that same dualism here, hardened hands capable of rowing or battle, eyes capable of gauging risk like traders. There remains doubt among historians regarding whether Viking crews made the decision to raid or trade upon arrival at foreign shores. It is claimed in some sources that they determined by chance, others by humor or rumor. Maybe the distinction between trade and conquest was never in place but ever-changing with the tide. You observe the sailors tallying their merchandise, coils of wool, sheened bone, worked combs and little pouches of salt. Each is humble but valuable, the sort of thing that might purchase passage, companionship or life. They treat them gently as though they touch promise ahead. A man holds out a necklace of amber beads, the light hits it and the beads shine like drops of frozen sunlight, tears of the sea, he says, quoting an old proverb. You cup one in your hand and sense its smoothness, its warmth. It has both memory and hope. Travelers from distant lands long ago characterized the Vikings as frightening yet enchanting. They might come with axes or gifts depending on the direction of the wind. That ambivalence is deep-seated in their nature, a testament to the fact that existence was not simply based on brawn but on accommodation. The boat itself is a marketplace today. Voices are raised as they haggle with each other for entertainment, a knife exchanged for pelts, a cloak for a carved comb. The laughter sounds like it's light, almost homey. You realize that this too is warmth, the warmth of trust, of exchange, of knowing one's value by others. An old sailor speaks of the great trading town of Hedderby, where goods from the east met treasures from the west. You could smell the world there, he says with a wistful smile. You imagine the scent, tar, honey, spices and sweat all mingling in the cold air. By the evening the silver talk becomes forgotten and the sea reasserts itself, the sail becomes filled with wind and the ship picks up speed. You stand close to the rail and you consider the treasures they pursue. Gold can glitter, but it is the pursuit of it that keeps them alive, that gives them meaning and that heats them through long winter. The sun sets low, casting the water to bronze. You can almost discern the city reflections glinting on the surface of the waves, cities these sailors dream to reach. The air chills up again, but your mind is warmed by a heat born not of fire nor fur, but of human ambition, the desire to build and to share between impossible distances. The longship surges forward, carrying the hopes of every man and woman aboard. Behind them is frost, before them, perhaps, is fortune. Either the journey itself is the wealth and tonight the sea shimmers with the hope of it. By dawn the next morning the sea rests quietly as if in sleep. The wind caresses gently over the deck, stirs the ropes and the sleeping cloaks. You sense salt, wood and something sweetly subtle from the tar which caulked the planks. The men and women on board grumble slowly, sleeping off, waking themselves, their minds already running homeward. With every ship that set sail from the northern coast there were still fires burning in the longhouses far behind. The women who remained at home tended the fires, cared for them through the bitter winters and waited for sails to come back over the horizon. You see them now, faces aglow by the firelight, hearing the wind on the roof timbers and wondering where their loved ones are wandering. Archaeological research on settlements in Iceland and Norway indicates that the women managed farms and estates when the men were out at sea. They cared for livestock, brewed ale, stored grain surpluses and determined which lands to plant. Their domestic strength offset the risks of the ocean. No journey could ever have set out and no sailor ever have wanted to come back without them. A woman, as a saga from Iceland tells us, could divorce her husband by saying it in front of witnesses and leaving the door of the longhouse. That image lingers with you, the same flame that lit the house also gave authority. These women were not quiet figures in the background, waiting in the shadows, but pillars of survival. Specialists continue to debate how much women shaped the life at sea. Some contend that their functions stopped on shore, while others refer to graves bearing weapons and parts of ships, implying that some of them might have traveled along with the voyages themselves. The evidence is sparse, but you can sense their presence in every anecdote, every wistful look back home. You picture the longhouses themselves, massive wooden halls thick with light and smoke, peat-smelling fires burning, roasted meat, woolen hangings adorn the walls, color stories, children lie close to the fire as their mothers spin, their fingers working with good rhythm. Outside snow falls gently against the roof, inside time passes. One interesting legend speaks of women who put carved wooden statues of their husbands close to the fire and gave them morsels of food so the sea would not starve them. It sounds like legend, but it is replete with love masquerading as ritual, even from a distance sharing heat by use of imagination. Historic accounts recall that when mariners came back, feasts illuminated the longhouses for days, meat was roasted over open fires, horns of mead were passed from hand to hand, and singing swirled up so high that it moved the rafters. In those times, all those bitter nights at sea froze into delight. You can almost hear the laughter now, carried faintly across the centuries. There is doubt among researchers regarding whether or not family inheritance functioned when trips met with disaster. Some evidence shows that the women asserted full rights to their farms and homes, and became heads of small communities. Others are convinced that the male relatives assumed command, yet regardless of the lines of the law, the women maintained the fires burning, the emblem of continuity that held the Viking world together. The crew mention home a lot these days. One man says how his wife cooks, another the laughter of his child. Their voices dissipate and you sense the temperature shift within them. Hope burns warmer than flame. A young sailor exhibits to you a pendant cut in the form of a bird. She created this, he says softly, told me it would carry me home. The edges are smoothed out by his hand. You notice that in each token, each prayer, the notion of home beats more powerfully than the death fear. The sagas tend to start and conclude by a hearthside. Comfort gives rise to adventures and they always come back to it. Even today you can sense that tug, the unseen strand connecting every wayfaring heart to a home of light and expectation. As told by travelers who came to Norse shores, the flicker of longhouse fires was visible far out across the fjords on winter nights. Those lights were not mere domestic flames. They were signal fires. A lost sailor at sea could dream of that light leading him home, a guarantee that the world had not left him behind. You shut your eyes and see it vividly, the sputtering flames, the bread baking in the stone ovens, the murmur of voices growing to soft words. The fire-tending woman looks occasionally toward the door, not with fear but with unwavering trust. She understands that the sea will repay what it takes. When night falls once more, the boat sways softly, and someone starts singing a song that is reminiscent of a lullaby. You know its beat as one that belongs to children, which has been passed down from mother to son. The tune is so home-like, sewn into memory by ancestors. You see that these fires on the beach, cared for by waiting hands, are part of what sustained the Vikings in the cold darkness. Their expeditions were not just spurred on by greed but by homesickness. The ocean tested their flesh, but recollection of home gave their spirits warmth. The wind changes direction slightly, and the sail fills it with a sigh. Before us more sea, but beyond it burns a hearth that is never quite extinguished. You can almost sense its warmth over the expanse of ice and salt, a sweet reminder that all journeys are, at their core, pilgrimages to belonging. The day starts with laughter. You awaken to the roll of dice on wood, followed by a cacophony of groans and cheers. The air is filled with the scent of sea salt and the acrid tang of smoke from the tiny brazier at the base of the mast. For the first time in days, the atmosphere on board is one of lightness. The chill still lingers, but spirits seem to blaze higher than any flame. Archaeologists have found gaming pieces made from bone, amber, and antler in Viking settlements. These were not playthings. They were emblems of leisure and togetherness. You observe now as a crowd gathers around a tiny board etched on the deck. The players hunch close, breath misting, their eyes intense with intent. In one ancient legend, sailors whiled away the time playing Linnerfadical, a game of kings and assailants at a board. It was an exercise in strategy, in patience, and in staying calm under stress. The game reflects their world to the dot. A single player standing watch in the center, with others closing in from every direction. Every step a choice between risk and protection. You see how much this resembles their life on the sea. Scholars still argue about the specifics of the game. The pieces discovered in graves vary by region, which indicates there were many variants. Some believe it represented war. Others that it was a way of storytelling. Observing the crew now, you think it is merely a matter of keeping the mind alert when the world goes white and static. One of the sailors rolls a pair of dice made from walrus bone. The ring of them is clean and rewarding. He laughs when he loses, shrugs, and takes a swallow from a leather flask. It is not the loss but the noise, the motion, the evidence that life goes on even when the sea ice is over them. Foreign traveler accounts in writing tell of how Norsemen transported mead and ale aboard ships whenever they could. Honey and barley fermented and transmuted into heat that glowed from the inside out. You can smell it now, sweet and thick in the air. They pass the flask, and when it comes to you, the liquid sears your throat before it finds comfort. An interesting reference in the sagas tells of sailors reciting riddles and poems to outsmart each other on a long night. The losers had to row longer hours or lose their share of food. You smile at the memory. Even in adversity they made a game of suffering. Historians disagree about just how widespread drinking at sea was. Some say alcohol was a luxury and a rarity. Others say small quantities were a necessity for morale. Based on the cheer all around you now, you think the latter. Each sip a protest against the cold, a toast to survival. The music adds to the laughter. One taps a rhythm on the side of the hull and the other slaps along. Voices come up in jaunty songs that carry over the water. The words are coarse and playful, full of ridicule about who snores the loudest or who lost at a game to a lucky roll. The laughter crashes like waves. Scholars point out humor was a significant aspect of Viking resilience. In their society, a quick wit was as valued as bravery. A quick tongue could carry the day as surely as a quick sword could carry the battlefield. You see it so now in the flash of their eyes, in laughter yelled through chattering teeth. One of the sailors attempts to stand a knife on its edge on a rolling cask. The rest of them encourage him on. When it drops, they bitterly lament, and one begins to sing a mock funeral song. The deck erupts with laughter so strenuous it causes the rigging to vibrate. The sea itself, for an instant, appears to halt and listen. Archaeologists in Greenland have excavated shards of musical instruments and incised game boards buried together. The find indicates that play and art accompanied them everywhere. They bore joy just as gently as they bore arms. With the light fading, the game is slow, replaced by hushed talk. One spins a yarn of a ghost ship that shows itself only to those who are already lost. Another says he caught one glimpse of it, green and glowing on a night when the fog hid all the stars. The sailors listen, half in doubt, half enchanted. Storytelling and fear are blended like wind and water. An odd piece of information documented in folklore tells us laughter repelled spirits. Seamen would go on making a racket after nightfall to prevent ghosts from coming aboard. You glance around today and understand that maybe this is what they do as a matter of instinct, keeping darkness at bay with laughter. The flask goes around once more, now lighter. The cheeks of the sailors flush red, eyes shining, shoulders untroubled. The sea, for the first time, is almost benevolent. You feel that this is what survival is about here, not just braving the cold but finding ways for life to become larger than it is. The night darkens. The stars are bright and infinite, tossed about like salt on a dark table. The laughter subsides into whispers, then into humming. Someone snores gently, another prays under his breath. The vessel sways them all like a cradle, and you are warm not from drink or fire but from the silent presence of other people who are wise enough to find happiness at the end of the world. The Vikings survived because they would not be bound by the cold. They laughed, sang, and played until even the wind looked friendly. You know that in the laughter itself, there is the most real kind of heat, the sort no storm will ever extinguish. The laughter is gone at dawn. What remains is quiet so acute it stings like a blade cutting across the sky. The sea once more darkens to black, surging in heavy waves that pound the ship with deep, relentless beat. You are awakened by creaking ropes, and sense the cold come back like a predator that had only slept. Storms belong to the language of the sea, and today it speaks loudly. The wind appears first, tugging at the sail until it goes taut. Spray cuts and bursts, stinging on your face, converting breath to mist. The men move quickly, securing ropes, lowering the mast, tying down barrels. Each has its job. Panic uses energy, and out here, energy is life. Archaeological excavations of shipwrecks off the Norwegian coast tell us how frequently these expeditions met with calamity. Pieces of hulls, shattered oars and skeletons speak of storms with no mercy. Each wreck is a reminder that bravery was never enough. It is claimed in an entry in an Icelandic chronicle that whole fleets sometimes disappear making the winter crossings. The sea might suddenly rise and engulf ships before they could turn their bows towards land. You picture the terror of that last moment. No horizon, no stars, just howling darkness and the brackish moisture in the mouth. There is controversy among researchers as to how much weather forecasting the Vikings actually comprehended. Some argue they could read subtle signs in cloud color or wave motion. Others think that even the best sailor could only trust instinct. What cannot be predicted must be endured. A sailor shouts something to the helmsman, his voice lost in the wind. The ship lurches sideways and cold water rushes across the deck, soaking everything in its path. The shock steals your breath. Behind you, faces are set firm, their attention absolute. You notice how discipline is a form of warmth in itself, keeping the crew solid when the world outside shatters. Accounts of later Norse literature have mariners applying snow to their faces in storms to remain vigilant. The icy bite kept them awake. You watch one man perform it now, his eyes filmily tired but his action certain. Another holds the side rail with hands so clenched his knuckles burst. The blood congeals immediately, a thin red crystal on the wood. There's a strange legend about sailors who see a radiant woman walking on water in stormy seas. She was named //U00FA, the sea daughter, protector and killer. Some swore she led them home, others said she cursed them to death. You scan the waves, half hoping to catch sight of her. The storm has the sort of magic, where each bolt of lightning seems to be a living presence. Historians continue to debate if the Vikings actually feared the sea or if they revered it. Some believe that they regarded it as a god unto itself, above even Njord's control. Others believe they respected it merely as a part of existence, something to be worked with, not against. You conclude both are accurate. No one endures this amount of time at risk and doesn't come away with reverence. A monstrous wave hits. The boat lurches violently and you crash into the railing. Frigid water cascades down, seeping through every last woolen layer. The noise is overwhelming, wind screaming, wood splintering, people yelling orders. A hand wraps around your arm and tugs you up. It holds on tight but is not unyielding. In the midst of turmoil they support each other. The chill turns into a burning sensation that seeps into bone. It begins to feel as if it crawls up your fingers into your arms towards your chest. Creeping death was how the Vikings described this creeping flame, and when it moved into the heart, no prayer could drive it back. To combat it, they keep moving, stomping their feet, yelling to remain alert. Movement equals heat, immobility equals defeat. Several accounts of ship funeral practices frequently indicate the depositing of personal goods along with the dead combs, knives, drinking horns. Each item testified to life, existing on beyond the flesh.